Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the flickering shadows of a 14th century village, somewhere between the crunch of straw underfoot and the hush of evening bells. You're not a noble, not even a merchant's daughter, just a maiden in a thatched roof world where cows are currency and futures are whispered over soup pots. Lanterns swing gently above worn cobblestone, casting golden circles of light on walls smeared with ash and history. Smoke rises lazily from chimneys, carrying the scent of burning wood and the faint promise of winter. You're 13, maybe 14. Not that anyone's counting birthdays precisely, and tonight, your mother smooths your hair like she's preparing a gift. Your uncle's stopped by just to talk, and your father has the kind of furrowed brow he only wears when negotiating grain prices or marriage contracts. You already know what they're thinking. And if you had a little sister, she'd be listening through the walls, clutching a piece of dry bread, praying it won't be her turn next. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge back from the well just as the sun sets the bucket sloshing against your skirt, the cold metal handle biting into your palm. You think of nothing in particular, just that the chickens are quiet tonight, and your father's voice carried strangely across the courtyard. At the door, your mother doesn't greet you. She just opens it like she's been waiting. Inside, firelight plays across faces that suddenly seem very old. Your uncle's smile is tight-lipped. Your father leans forward, elbows on knees. "Come here, girl," he says, and it's not a request. You kneel automatically because that's what daughters do. The heat from the hearth crackles behind you. On the table, a jug of mead, a knotted cord, and a single silver coin. That coin feels louder than any voice in the room. "Old Merrick's boy," your uncle begins like it's the first line of a familiar spell. You don't know Merrick's boy. You've seen him once, maybe. Dirty feet, too many teeth eyes like a wet goose. You nod, because what else is there? This is how it begins. Not with bells or bouquets, not even with affection, but with the tone men use when discussing oxen. Your mind drifts while they talk. You remember the fair last spring, the girl with the red scarf who vanished after speaking to a travelling merchant. No one said what happened, only that her mother stopped smiling and her father took to drinking. You wonder if she was lucky or unlucky. Your mother clears her throat softly. She's strong, she says, almost apologetically. Carries water twice a day. Knows how to spin. It's not about your mind or your laughter. It's about what you can carry, what you can endure, what you're worth. Outside an owl calls. The world turns cold. This is what the marketplace looks like for you. No stalls or shouting, no colourful flags. Just a girl kneeling in a room where her fate is being bartered in shadows. Historians still argue whether young women had any say at all in these arrangements. Some claim daughters could refuse. Others believe refusal only meant a colder hearth or fewer potatoes. You're not sure you care about the debate, because in your reality the decision has already been made. Later that night, you lie on your straw-stuffed mattress, staring at the beams above your fingertips, brushing a splinter in the wood. You imagine yourself older, married. You imagine a man's breath against your neck, but not kindly. You imagine the belly your mother warned you about. Babies come like storms, she said once, and some take the house with them. No one teaches you about love. They teach you how to sew, how to pray, how to scrub blood from cloth if needed. They teach you silence. But here's the thing. No one tells you out loud. This isn't just about your life. It's about the family's grain storage, the land. They don't quite own the sheep that went missing last winter. Marrying you off is about survival. Yours, yes, but mostly theirs. Quaint, isn't it? And just when you think the night can't twist itself any further, your older brother slips into your room and sits at your feet. He doesn't speak for a long time, just picks at a knot in the hem of your blanket. Then he says, "Don't cry at the altar. It makes you look weak." And you realise you've already been traded. Not for love, not even for lust, for leverage. Welcome to the medieval marriage marketplace. Hope you brought a dowry and a strong stomach. You wake up to the sound of hens clucking church bells tolling in the distance, and your mother kneading bread like the dough offended her. The night's quiet verdict still hangs over your head like the smoke curling from the chimney. There's no official date, not yet, but your fate is already thick in the air. You step outside to draw water again, avoiding the eyes of your neighbour's boy, who used to throw frogs at you for fun and now suddenly nods like he knows something you don't. Your mother doesn't speak much that morning. She only says use the nice scarf today. You know what that means. You wind it tight around your shoulders and go to the village edge where old Marta waits with a satchel of dried herbs and the judgment of 100 ancestors in her eyes. She's the one the women go to for pain, for birth, for silence. And now, she's the one sizing you up, her gaze scanning your waist, your ankles, even your teeth. She's clean, she mutters, which would feel more flattering if it didn't sound like livestock commentary. Then she asks, she bled yet? Your ears go hot. Your mother answers, but you don't hear it. Instead, you stare at the leather bag on Marta's hip, the one embroidered with a red flower that probably means something herbal and terrifying. This is the price of purity, measured not in love or kindness, but in blood. Historians still debate the accuracy and prevalence of virginity checks, but the cultural obsession was undeniable. If you're too late to bloom, they think you're hiding something. If you're too early, they worry you're overripe. Either way, you're on the shelf. Aunt Nola once joked that some girls stuff sheep's blood in a rag to fake the first bridal stain. You laughed at the time until she added, "That's better than getting turned out or worse." The bread you were chewing went dry in your throat. You think of what you've learned so far, how to spin flax without drawing blood, how to make broth without salt, how to read a man's mood by the angle of his shoulders. But none of that counts now. What counts is your body's readiness to bear weight, to stretch, to deliver not just children, but stability alliances and heirs. Even if your hips are still narrow and your heart wider than the river. Your friend Elswith wasn't so lucky. Her family couldn't afford to wait for a dowry match, so she was promised to a tanner twice her age. She disappeared the week before the wedding. Some say she ran. Some say the tanner found her anyway. The truth, buried somewhere under town gossip and God's silence. Back home you notice the way your father looks at you now, not as a child, but as a negotiation. Like a sack of grain he's not sure weighs enough. That afternoon a visitor arrives, Jorah, the cousin from the next village. She's older, married young, and survived 2 births, 1 stillborn. She speaks gently but clearly like someone who's lost things she's not ready to name. She brings honeycomb and a truth you won't marry for love, not now, not ever. But that doesn't mean you have to give yourself away for nothing. You look at her hands, they're cracked and strong. She places one on your head. Just remember, when they talk of purity, they're talking about control, not value. That night you dream of bees in your belly. The next day, old Marta returns. This time, she brings a priest. He doesn't look at you. He just opens a worn book and mutters prayers like dust spells. He dips his finger in oil, smears your forehead and says, "You've been noted." You're not sure what that means. But your mother nods, and your father presses a coin into the priest's hand, and you realize you're being catalogued. Like inventory. That evening you hear your name spoken outside the door, not like a daughter, like a discussion. You press your ear to the wood and hear numbers, goats, chickens, acres. There's a pause. Then your uncle says something about your hips. You want to vanish. You go to bed early, you don't sleep. Because here's the other price of purity no one mentions: it puts a target on your back. It invites attention regulation judgment. And when something is so precious it must be locked up, someone always tries to steal it. Historians have unearthed records of women punished for impropriety on mere rumour, often with no defence possible. Others were married off quickly to preserve honour, their futures sacrificed on the altar of family name. You try to hold on to yourself, to the rhythm of the spinning wheel, to the memory of warm milk and dry grass in summer. But it slips, replaced by the rustle of your mother's scarf and the sharp smell of elderflower paste. That night you bleed. Your mother finds the cloth before you can hide it. She says nothing, just folds it neatly and slips it into a basket like it's proof. The next morning she tells you, "Now we can speak seriously." You don't ask what that means, because you already know. You're sent to the market the next morning with a woven basket and a bundle of eggs. But this isn't about errands. This is about being seen. Your mother smooths your apron twice, adds a pinch of colour to your cheeks with rosewater and ash, and places a small sprig of thyme behind your ear. Smile. But not too much, she says, like you're a loaf of bread, trying not to look too stale. The town square buzzes with voices bartering, barking dogs, a lute badly played. You move through it all with the strange awareness that you're being watched. Not because you're beautiful or bold, but because you're available, eligible, of interest. A boy with muddy boots leers at you from behind a fruit stall. A butcher calls you lass, like he's testing how it sounds. And over by the well, a cluster of old men mutter about your family's land like it's already changed hands. One of them spits and says, "She'll go quick." Your stomach turns. You duck into the shadow of a cloth tent to catch your breath. Inside, bolts of wool sway like heavy curtains. The merchant doesn't speak to you. You're not here to buy. You're part of the merchandise in a way. Not directly, of course, but adjacent. Your family's place in the village depends on your marriage now. What you bring, what you don't. Back outside, your path crosses the baker's apprentice. He's tall, soft-spoken, and smells faintly of cinnamon. He grins and offers you a warm bun from the tray. You take it. Thank him. For a moment it feels like something ordinary, something lovely. Then your cousin appears and gives you a look sharp enough to slice bread. "You're not here to flirt," she hisses. "You're here to be evaluated." Because here's the truth, matching is not about feelings, it's about status. Your family isn't poor, but they're not landed either. A good match could mean an alliance with a slightly richer family, maybe one with 3 pigs instead of 1, or better tools, or a son apprenticed to someone who isn't completely hopeless. A bad match or no match could mean years of spinster whispers, reduced rations, and eventually being handed over to the church like a defective wheelbarrow. Historians still argue whether emotional compatibility was ever a concern in 14th century peasant marriages. There's little written record because those feelings rarely made it to parchment, but personal letters, rare as they were, suggest that some couples learned to care over time, like ivy winding around stone. Others, well, let's just say, not every hearth is warm. Your father, meanwhile, is doing the real work, visiting the smithy, the mill, the tanner's porch, casually dropping your name into conversations like a merchant dangling bait. He speaks of your cooking, your quietness, your health. Not once does he mention your laughter. Not once does he ask what you want. That evening the house smells like boiled turnips and burnt wood. Your mother is grinding barley for beer. Your brother sharpens a blade by the door. You sit in the corner and stitch your fingers aching from tight thread. Across the room your father says something to your uncle that makes them both laugh. Something about getting a good price before the frost. You look up. Your mother catches your eye. She doesn't smile. Later you sneak out for air. The moon is low and yellow like a coin fallen in the mud. You walk past the pens, past the last cottage, down to the stream. The water is cold and fast. You dip your hands into it and think about choices, how few you have, and how even those don't feel like yours. You think about what it would be like to walk into the woods and just not come back. But you know the stories. Girls who run either get eaten by wolves or married off to them. A voice startles you. It's the baker's apprentice again. He says your name. You don't answer. He sits on the stump beside you, close, but not too close. He offers you a piece of dried apple, and this time you refuse. Not because you don't want it, but because you've realized something painful desire doesn't factor into marriage. Reputation does. You stand nod and walk away, back toward the cottage, back toward duty, because your father doesn't care about cinnamon smiles. He cares about whether a man can afford a new plough before spring. Back home, your mother's waiting by the fire. She doesn't scold, just hands you a small bundle of herbs, lavender, sage, and something bitter. Sleep, she says. You lie in bed, the scent of crushed leaves in your hair, and you think of all the things that match socks, spoons, puzzle pieces, not people, not hearts. The next week brings something you never expected, an actual auction. No, not pigs or barley or even that suspicious-looking dog with 3 legs and 1 ear. This time it's a woman, and everyone watches like it's just another Monday. You hear about it from Ellsworth's brother, who grins as he tells the story like it's the most entertaining thing since that one cow fell in the pond. Husband couldn't stand her anymore, he says, biting into a plum. Took her to the square with a halter round her neck. Sold her off like a mule. You laugh awkwardly because you think he's joking. He's not. Later you see it for yourself. A woman tall, maybe 30 hair in thick ropes of brown, stands with quiet dignity, while her husband shouts numbers at the crowd. He's red-faced, impatient, drunk. She holds the rope in her own hands, a symbol perhaps that she's complicit. But her eyes are empty in a way that makes your stomach hurt. The crowd plays along casually like it's a bit of sport. Someone yells, "Throw in a goat and I'll take her." Another adds, "She cook or just curse the bread." Everyone laughs. The woman doesn't flinch. Eventually a man steps forward, offers coin and leads her away. No ceremony, no priest, just a rope and the reek of cider. Historians still debate whether wife-selling was common or rare, legal or frowned upon. There are court records that mention it often, with phrases like, with her consent or as a last resort. Some argue it was a crude form of divorce, a way to sever a bond without the church's permission. Others believe it was nothing short of humiliation masked as choice. You believe your eyes. You believe the way the woman looked over her shoulder one last time and didn't cry. That night back at home, your father mutters something about market prices. Your mother doesn't speak, but she does wrap a bundle of cloth and tuck it beneath the bed. Later you sneak a peek, it's a set of her wedding linen, still white despite the years. That you realise is your inheritance. Not wealth, not love. Linen and silence. Over the next few days, the tone in your house shifts. Your father starts cleaning his boots more often. Your mother adds honey to the bread. Your younger brother gets sent outside more while you're asked to stay in. A visitor is coming. A suitor. Maybe even two. You try not to think about ropes and auctions. You try not to imagine what happens if your price isn't met. And then he arrives. His name is Harwin. He's 20, maybe 25. Brown eyes. Broad shoulders. No visible deformities, which by village standards is practically royalty. He smells of leather and horses. He speaks softly but firmly. He looks at your father when he talks, not at you. The two men sit by the fire. Mead is poured. Jokes are made. You pour the drinks. You do not sit. At some point your mother beckons. You follow her outside where the wind carries whispers and wood smoke. She places her hands on your shoulders and says, "He's not the worst we could hope for." It's not reassurance. It's logistics. You want to ask, does he have kindness? Does he sing when he thinks no one's listening? Has he ever saved a baby bird? But instead you ask, what's his trade? Leather, she replies. Tanners. Always tanners. They bring smell and coin. Inside, Harwin says something and the men laugh again. You hear your name followed by the word fertile. You wonder how many other girls have heard that same chuckle. How many felt the warmth of fire on their cheeks while men discussed their wombs like planting soil? That night you find yourself at the well again. The water is still dark, full of 1,000 unspoken wishes. You lean over, see your reflection and barely recognise her. Not because she's older, but because she looks so terribly quiet. You want to shout, you want to smash the jug and dance barefoot in the mud, but you don't. Instead you whisper, "Let me love," or "Let me run." The next morning, Harwin brings your father a leather belt and your brother a pouch of cured hide. He gives your mother a nod and hands you of all things a comb. It's small wooden, carved with a symbol that might be a flower or a bird or nothing at all. You accept it. You smile. You perform the part. And yet something inside you flinches. Because even when there are no ropes, no shouting, no auctions, you're still being traded. Only now it's just wrapped in softer words. Back in your room, you place the comb in the bundle of linens beneath the bed. You lie down and close your eyes. And for the first time in days, you don't dream at all. The next morning is strangely ceremonial. Your father rises before dawn and shaves with a chipped blade he only uses on feast days. Your mother scours the hearth as if a bishop were visiting. Even your brother puts on the tunic without holes and manages not to wipe his nose on the sleeve. You know what this means. Harwin is coming again, and this time it's not for small talk and combs. This time he brings his parents. They arrive in a modest cart pulled by a stubborn-looking mule, the kind that bites and kicks with no warning. His mother wears a coif so tightly bound it looks like it might squeeze thoughts right out of her head. His father is quiet, eyes sharp, hands scarred from tanning hides and holding ledgers. They sit at your table, your mother offers bread and broth, your father offers stories, you offer silence. And then it begins. Not a conversation, a transaction. The elder Harwin produces a small pouch that jingles coin clearly and lays it on the table like a challenge. Your father opens his mouth, but before he can speak, Harwin's mother interrupts with a single phrase. We'd prefer she bring a cow. You glance at your mother. Her mouth tightens. The cow is gone traded last season for oats when the grain barn flooded. They know this. You know they know. But it's still brought up like a test. Your mother's voice is steady. We can offer linens a comb and 2 bolts of undyed wool. Harwin's father leans back. No spinning wheel. Only the frame says your father. A pause. A sniff. The coin pouch is drawn back slightly like a threat. Historians still debate the typical content of dowries in the 14th century. Some claim livestock was paramount. Others say wool and tools were of equal value. Either way, the takeaway is clear: a girl without assets is a girl at risk. Harwin himself stays silent throughout. He watches you with calm, unreadable eyes. Not cruel, not kind, just assessing. Then the topic shifts to bloodlines. Any illness, asks Harwin's mother. Your father's lips thin? None. Her grandfather lived past 70. And her monthly cycle, freshly begun, your mother says quickly like she's hurrying past a bad smell. You stare at the dried herbs on the table, trying not to exist. And then, perhaps to your own horror, you speak. I can spin and cook. I know how to tend a garden. I almost say I've never even kissed anyone but catch yourself. That's not what they want. Harwin's mother arches an eyebrow. She speaks clearly at least. And just like that, you are a ledger item again. A list of skills, a series of practical features. Strong teeth, quiet voice. Bloodlines that stretch back without scandal, at least none you know of. Harwin's father finally grunts. Will take 3 days to decide. The coin pouch vanishes into his cloak. And they leave. You don't breathe until the mule disappears around the bend. That night your father sighs in a way that makes the beams groan. Your mother rubs your shoulder without looking at you. Your brother tosses a pebble between fingers and mutters, could have asked for a hen too. But you go to bed wondering what Harwin is thinking. Because here's where things get strange when nobles make matches. They don't do it with coin pouches, they do it with kingdoms. You've heard the stories. The countess who married the baron's son at 15 to keep her family's castle. The princess bartered away for the piece of a borderland. One of your cousins works in the manor kitchen and once overheard a noble say, a fertile daughter is better than an army. Historians point out that noble daughters were often used to seal treaties, end feuds, and secure military support. It was chess with wombs for pieces, and in a smaller, quieter way, you're part of the same game, just with fewer candles and more chicken broth. Later that week, as you weed the edge of the cabbage rows, you see a figure approach. It's not Harwin. It's not his parents. It's an old woman in a red shawl. You recognise her vaguely, a widow from the far edge of town. Her hair's mostly gone, but her eyes gleam like polished stone. She smiles at you with far too many teeth. She says, you'll be married before the month's out. You ask, how do you know? She shrugs. Your mother bought more flax than usual. Then she leans close and whispers, don't let them knot your fate too tightly. You blink. She's gone. The phrase sticks in your mind, not your fate, like a ribbon or a rope or a noose. That night, your mother pulls out the good linens again. She hums as she stitches. Her hands are quick, precise, tireless. You ask, what if he says no? She glances up. Then we try again. You ask, and if I say no? She doesn't answer. Which of course is the answer. 3 days pass in a kind of suspended reality, like your breath is caught somewhere just behind your ribs and refuses to leave. You still feed the hens. You still haul water. You still pretend to care whether the beans are sprouting on the south edge of the plot. But beneath all of it, your mind keeps circling back to that red shawl and the woman's words, don't let them knot your fate too tightly. Then on the 4th morning a knock. Not the hesitant kind. The kind that says decision made. Harwin stands at the door. Behind him his parents. This time there's no cart. Just a wrapped bundle, a solemn nod and a pause long enough to make your mother clench her hands around her apron. We accept, says Harwin's father as if he's ordering timber. Your father nods once. No smile. Just relief. The deal is struck with no ceremony. No dramatic unveiling. Just a grunted agreement, an exchange bundle, and a priest fetched before supper. He's young, the priest nervous and sweating through his wool. He fumbles over the name of St. Dymphna and accidentally says fruitfulness twice in a row. Still, the moment lands. You are no longer a girl being bartered. You are now a girl being prepared. Not for a wedding yet, but for display. Because before the contract is sealed, you must be shown. And so enters the marriage broker. You've seen her before, bent-backed, quick-eyed, wrapped in wool dyed the colour of old moss. Her name is Rena, and no one knows where she sleeps. Some say in barns. Others say she has no home at all, just arrangements and secrets. She doesn't knock. She glides in like mist and appraises you without a word. Her fingers are long and thin, her eyes like coins hammered flat. She circles you once, twice, then mutters, she'll do. Your mother bristles. She's more than... But Rena cuts her off with a twitch of the mouth. Let's not pretend. She's not the merchant's daughter. She's not the baker's treasure. But she's whole. She's quiet. And that'll get you farther than you think. You're not sure whether to be insulted or relieved. Rena opens her pouch and begins pulling out things. A small mirror polished to a murky sheen. A ribbon red as berries. A bit of crushed lavender tied in cloth. Hold this under your tongue, she says. You do. It tastes like flowers dying slowly. She combs your hair with practised fingers, murmuring all the while. Never let them see your teeth first. Smile with your eyes. Bow your head, but not too low. Speak only when spoken to. If he touches your shoulder, lean in just slightly, not too much. Suggest submission, not desperation. It's theatre, all of it. You are being taught how to be purchased gracefully. Rena steps back, inspects you again, then nods. She'll pass. Then she turns to your parents. Let's talk brass tacks. And just like that, you're excused. You flee to the back garden where the air is thick with late summer dust and bees hum like they know something. You sit beneath the ash tree tracing lines in the dirt, with a stick wondering who else Rena has prepared. How many girls bowed their heads, just so held lavender under their tongues, pretended not to notice the buyer's eyes lingering too long. Historians often miss the microeconomies of village marriages, the whispered assessments, the informal networks of midwives, traders and women like Rena, who made matches not by books but by instinct and gossip. No official records mark what Rena knows, but somehow she always places the right girl in the right arms. Whether those arms are safe is another matter. That night Harwin returns alone. He brings with him a woven satchel and a look that's almost uncertain. You meet him outside the house beneath the eaves where lantern light flickers like nervous breath. He speaks first. I'm not like my father. You nod, unsure what that's supposed to mean. He gestures to the satchel. Inside a pair of soft leather gloves. Handmade. Fine stitching. Your name carved lightly on the inner wrist. You blink. He clears his throat. I wanted to offer something. That was mine, not his. For a second the world tilts. You feel the edge of something unexpected, maybe kindness, maybe pretense. Hard to say. But then he says you'll need them for winter chores. And just like that, the warmth flickers out. You thank him. You go inside. You place the gloves beside the comb, beside the linens, beside the part of yourself you keep hidden in cloth and corners. Later, Rena speaks with your mother under low candlelight. You hear her voice measured businesslike. Once the wedding is done, keep her busy. Idle girls invite trouble, especially the pretty ones. You wonder which part you are, pretty or just busy. Before sleep comes, you lie awake and consider this. Your value has now been appraised, brokered, and tentatively accepted. It's not romantic. It's not even particularly personal. It's a matter of grain reputation and doing better than last season. Still, you hold the gloves in your hand and think he could be worse. And then you wonder, is that really enough? Your body still feels like yours, but now it's being managed like a communal resource. The next few days are filled with odd little rituals that no one calls rituals. Your mother shows you how to oil your hair with rosemary and wear your best apron even while scrubbing floors. Your posture is corrected at every turn. Back straight eyes, low voice soft but not breathy. You don't just exist anymore. You present. And suddenly everything is about timing. You're told casually that you're now of legal age. 12, maybe 13, maybe 15. It's not like anyone's really counting except when it matters. In the 14th century, canon law stated that girls could marry at 12 boys at 14. Historians still argue whether these ages were widely practiced or simply theoretical. In some villages, girls were wed even earlier, while in others families waited until a dowry was secure or puberty was visible. But the law, the letter of the rule, says you're ready. And so you are. That realization hits you while fetching water one cool morning. The sun is barely up and you're walking with your bucket past a neighbour's garden when a man older thin-lipped says, "She's ripe, isn't she?" to no one in particular. You freeze, cheeks burning, but you don't respond, because responding is dangerous. Instead, you walk faster. You wonder if he meant it cruelly or just thoughtlessly. You wonder if your mother has heard similar words spoken about herself in the past. You wonder how many generations of women have known exactly what ripe means and how little it has to do with fruit. When you get home, your hands are shaking so badly that you spill half the bucket on the stone step. Your brother curses. Your mother doesn't scold. She just says, "Go inside. Wash up." You don't tell her what happened. You don't tell anyone. Because these moments, these subtle sour things, they're part of the air now, like smoke in your lungs. That afternoon, your father begins drawing symbols on a bit of parchment. Not real writing he can't read, but enough to show the priest and Harwin's father that a union is agreed upon. Your mother prepares a new dish with honey and clove. She lights a small votive candle and says a prayer to St. Agnes, patron of chastity. You wonder whether she's asking for protection or obedience. Then come the lessons. Not from books, those are for monks, but from women who know. Your cousin tells you what the wedding night really means. She uses metaphors you wish she wouldn't. She draws a circle in the dirt and jabs the stick through it. It hurts at first, then it doesn't, if you're lucky. You ask, what if I'm not? She says, then you learn to pretend. You laugh softly, nervously. She doesn't. Later, you find yourself under the ash tree again, away from the eyes and the evaluations. You stare up through its thinning canopy, counting the patches of sky between the leaves. That's when Jorah appears, the cousin who knows things. She sits beside you without a word, offers you a dried fig. You chew slowly. Then she says, don't be scared of the wedding. Be scared of the years after. You ask why? She replies, because a wedding is loud, but a life can be very quiet. You both sit in silence for a long time. Then she adds, but you'll manage. You're sharper than I was. It's a compliment maybe, or maybe a warning. In the following days, the pace picks up. Everything moves toward an invisible finish line. Harwin visits with more frequency. You walk together sometimes. He tells you about leather tanning dying selling. You listen. You nod. He never asks you a question. Not once. You wish he would, because even though he isn't cruel, he also isn't curious. You wonder what he would say if you told him you like the smell of crushed mint, that you once stole a plum and still feel guilty, that you're afraid of deep water and babies crying in the dark. But you don't tell him any of that, because that's not what this is. This is not about being known. This is about being ready. Your period comes again. Your mother notes it like a farmer logging frost. This time she makes you drink something bitter afterward. To clean the blood, she says. You don't ask why blood must be cleaned, you just drink. At night you lie awake and listen to the wind through the rafters. You imagine time as a ribbon being slowly tied tighter and tighter around your ribs. Every breath is harder than the last. The village bell rings one morning. A signal. A date has been chosen. 3 weeks. You will be married in 3 weeks. Your mother begins sewing at a feverish pace. Your father begins counting. Chickens, coins, favours. Your brother complains that he doesn't get to keep your bed. You try not to scream. Instead you make bread, you braid your hair, you walk to the stream and count the frogs. 1, 2, 7. Still there. Still watching. You kneel by the water and whisper, I'm not ready. And for a moment the wind seems to pause, as if it's listening, as if it already knows. It begins with an argument. Not between you and Harwin, he still barely speaks except to describe the leather curing process in excruciating detail, but between your parents. The kind where voices stay low sharp as knife edges, and things are said more in silence than in shouting. You hear the words shortchange insult and not worth a single sheep. Ah, the dowry. Again. You're in the next room pretending to count herbs, but every syllable cuts clear. Your mother wants to offer the flax bundle and a woven shawl made by your grandmother, a piece with real silver thread in the corners. Your father insists that's too generous. Harwin's family is lucky to have you. She's clean, he says flatly, as though stating the condition of a table. You stop counting. This is what your worth has been boiled down to, a sum of items and the absence of shame. That evening, Harwin's mother comes by unannounced. She brings 3 jars of tallow and a look that could dry paint. She sits at your table like she owns the grain bin, and starts casually discussing how the wedding linens will be divided. Your mother nods and smiles, but her lips twitch every time the woman says when she moves in. Not if, not soon, just when. Historians note that dowries weren't just financial exchanges, they were symbolic proofs of value designed to show that a girl's family believed in her ability to sustain a household. But it also meant pressure. Dowries were expected, and their absence spoke louder than their contents. Too little. You're desperate. Too much you're hiding something. Your cousin Teller once said a dowry is like bait. It tells the buyer what kind of fish you think you are. And sometimes it's not about the value of the bait. It's about who else is fishing. The next day you're told to stay home. No errands, no garden work. You're being measured. 2 women come to your door. One is old Marta the midwife. The other is an unfamiliar stranger, thin, quiet, with ink-stained fingertips. She carries a tablet and a quill. You recognize the look in her eyes, the kind that doesn't see people, only assessments. You're asked to stand, raise your arms, open your mouth, stick out your tongue. You comply because there's no other option. Your mother watches arms crossed. At one point the woman runs her fingers along your spine and mutters, good posture. Hips still narrow though. You flinch just slightly. Marta notices. Don't worry, she says. First birth always breaks something. They both chuckle. You don't. Then comes the real insult. Harwin's aunt stops by with a small wrinkled woman named Merla, who looks like she's been pickled in vinegar and spite. Merla claims to read energies and starts waving a lump of salt around your head while muttering. Your mother bristles but says nothing. When Merla finishes, she shrugs and announces she's not cursed. It's the first relief you've felt all week, until she adds, but she's stubborn, you'll want to keep her busy. You're not sure what hurts more, the assumption or the accuracy. That evening as candles flicker low, your father drinks more than usual. He complains about Harwin's offer again. Should have asked for 2 goats, he mutters. At least 2. Your mother snaps back. And what would that say? That we're desperate to get rid of her? They look at you, not with malice, just with exhaustion. Because you're not a daughter right now. You're a negotiation. And every sigh they make is another thread tightening around your future. You escape outside where the sky is heavy with stars and the wind smells of turned earth and the last of the summer herbs. You find yourself back at the ash tree tracing lines in the dirt again, trying to draw something, anything, that belongs only to you. Jorah finds you there. She doesn't speak for a while, just sits beside you and hums a song you haven't heard since childhood. Then she says, "Do you know what my dowry was?" You shake your head. 3 jars of honey, a goat, and a promise I'd never embarrass them. You look at her. Did you... She chuckles. No. I married a man who embarrassed himself enough for both of us. Then she turns serious. But I didn't die. And I made the best soup in the village for 5 winters. And I helped 2 other girls escape worse than I ever faced. You ask, did you love him? She says, eventually I loved that he died. It sounds harsher than she means it. She places something in your hand, a smooth stone. When the day comes, keep this in your pocket. Something that's only yours. You nod. She leaves, and you stay under the stars a little longer, breathing in the cold night air, holding that stone like it weighs more than it should. In the morning, the final dowry list is made. No goats, 1 flax bundle, 1 silver-threaded shawl, 2 bolts of wool, a comb, and you, all wrapped in silence and linen. They tie your hands together with wool. Soft, unspun, freshly pulled from the spindle and slightly damp with the morning dew. Not tight, just enough to bind. Just enough to make you feel it. You stand in the centre of the cottage with Harwin beside you, his hand warm and dry against yours. The wool circles your wrists like a snake that's learned to smile. This is not the wedding, not yet. This is the binding. A tradition older than the priest, older than the parchment, older than even the church's laws. Before the ink and the contracts, there was this 2 people, 2 hands and a thread, pulled tight by those who bore witness. The midwife leads the rite. She hums something in the old language as your hands are bound. Your mother watches from the side, holding a bundle of rosemary and bread symbols of health and nourishment. Your father sits near the hearth, sipping something strong and refusing to meet your eyes. Historians trace this ritual across Europe in Wales, Scotland, Brittany, and the low villages of the Holy Roman Empire. Some called it hand-fasting, some claimed it was a betrothal, others a full marriage in its own right. Scholars still argue whether it held legal weight or was just ceremony, but none of that matters now, because in this room, with the fire snapping softly and the air full of bread and beeswax, it is everything. The wool is tied, the blessing given, and just like that you belong to someone else. The room claps softly. Someone offers a cup of warm ale. Harwin's father grunts approval. His mother doesn't smile, but her nod feels victorious. Harwin himself glances sideways at you. You wonder what he sees. A girl, a promise, a contract wrapped in skin. You say nothing. Later the wool is removed, but symbolically you're still tied. That evening your mother bakes a round loaf with honey and thyme, marking it with a knife so the crust splits like a sunburst. It's placed on a wooden board and carried to Harwin's home, where the women of his family will inspect its texture smell and how it cracks under pressure. Like you in a way. You're told to wait. You do? Eventually the bread is returned, half-eaten. That's considered a good sign. 2 nights later, the families gather again, this time for the exchange of small items. These aren't gifts, they're tokens. Your mother gives Harwin a needle she's owned since girlhood. Your father offers him a wooden spoon carved from an ash branch the year you were born. You give him a tiny pouch of dried lavender. Harwin gives you a sliver of carved antler smoothed to fit your palm. For strength, he says. You try to imagine him carving it. You fail, but you say thank you. Then come the whispers. Not from your family, but from the neighbours. You overhear things. She's lucky it could have been Maren, and you know what her feet look like. I heard Harwin asked for the weaver's girl first, but she was already promised. They say the last girl in his family to marry died birthing twins. You learn to ignore most of it. But one thing sticks. A wrinkled woman with a milk tooth still hanging on mutters, "Let's see if she survives the binding night." The binding night? No one explains it, not directly, but suddenly everyone is whispering like they know something you don't. It's not the wedding night, though, that's coming fast as a cart on ice. It's the night before, when dreams are supposed to speak louder, when omens are listened to, when a girl might sit alone and ask herself if she really wants to go through with it. Your mother calls it nonsense. Your aunt says she ran the night before her binding got halfway to the woods and came back because she didn't want to die cold and hungry. You stay, but you don't sleep. The house is quiet except for the creak of the beams and the distant cough of your father. You lie on your straw mattress and watch the ceiling as moonlight crawls across it like a ghost. The wool is gone from your wrists, but you can still feel it, that soft, itchy pressure, that reminder that your hands once knew freedom. You think of all the other bindings in your life, the belt around your waist at age 8, the first time you bled and your mother burned your underclothes in secret, the time you tried to say no and your voice fell flat into the dirt. You wonder what happens if you untie yourself. Not literally, but in the mind. Is that allowed? Is that survival? Or is that just pretending louder? Outside, the wind howls once through the trees and dies away. A bird stirs, then silence. You close your eyes, and somewhere in the quiet of your thoughts you whisper, "If I must belong to someone, let me still belong to myself." And the darkness listens. The priest arrives at dawn, smelling faintly of ashes and old onions. He's not the same one who came to bless your forehead weeks ago. This one is older, rounder, with watery eyes and a voice like damp wood. He stumbles, stepping down from his mule, mutters something about saints and knees, and wipes his hands on his robes before entering the cottage. You were hoping for something more. Majestic. A figure glowing in morning light, a voice like bells. But no. He wheezes and scratches his scalp and immediately asks where the ale is. Harwin's family arrives a short while later, all wearing shades of brown that match the road. His mother wears a lace collar that looks stiff enough to slice bread. His father carries a small sack that clinks with coin and a paper the contract sealed with ink and a smear of wax. This, it seems, is how holy unions are made, with signatures and slightly sour breath. The ceremony is held right outside your home under the ash tree where you once sat drawing spirals in the dirt. Now it's been swept clean and 2 stools have been set. One for you, one for Harwin. You sit. You don't breathe. The priest opens his book. His Latin is sloppy more grunts than syllables. He fumbles the name of the saint again this time, confusing St. Agnes with St. Agatha, which would be funny if Agatha hadn't been martyred by fire. He looks up, clears his throat and recites the binding passage. You hear the familiar lines. "Do you before God and this company take this man to be your husband, to be faithful to him in body and in soul?" You say yes, quietly, because there is no choice. Harwin says the same. Then comes the blessing. Bread is broken, wine is passed, not communion, just custom. The priest raises his hand, mumbles a final phrase, and touches your forehead. "You are wife," he says, like a blacksmith declaring iron done. Your mother cries. Your father claps Harwin's shoulder. Your brother steals a piece of bread and is promptly smacked for it. The villagers cheer softly, politely. And just like that, it's done. You are married. You go inside to change your shoes. Not because it's tradition, because your feet hurt. Inside, your mother has prepared a corner for you, a basin of water, clean linen, a bowl of warm broth. She kisses your forehead, holds your hands and says, "You did well." You don't ask her what that means, because all you did was sit and say yes. A few hours later, the cart arrives. Harwin stands by the back, waiting. Your belongings have already been bundled, flax linens that comb the gloves, a jar of pickled root vegetables your aunt insists prevent fainting. You climb into the cart. The road stretches long and dusty ahead. Your house grows smaller behind. Halfway to the village edge, the priest's voice still echoes in your mind. You are wife. But what does that mean? Does it mean safety? Obedience? Does it mean the right to speak? Or only the duty to bear? The church claims marriage is sacred, inviolable, ordained by God. But you've heard the gossip. You know of women who sleep with bruises under sleeves, who cry into wash basins, who lose child after child, and are told to keep praying. Historians note that while marriage was seen as a holy bond, it also gave men legal ownership of their wives' bodies, labour and voices. A woman who fled an abusive husband could be forcibly returned. A woman who refused to consummate could be annulled, but at great social cost. And what of love? That soft, impossible thing that no one has mentioned once. What of it? The cart jolts and you nearly drop the pouch in your lap. Inside it, the smooth stone from Jorah, the antler charm from Harwin, a braid of your own hair cut quietly the night before and tied with red thread. Your tiny rebellion. You arrive at Harwin's cottage. It's larger than yours. There's a fence, a garden with 3 rows of carrots, a goat with 1 horn. Inside the hearth is lit. The bed is made. Everything smells faintly of smoke and leather. His mother shows you where the wash basin is. Harwin offers no words, just a nod. Then they leave you alone to settle in. You sit on the edge of the bed and stare at the wall. The priest's words ring again, to be faithful in body and in soul. Your body is here. Your soul, you're not sure. That evening the priest returns for a final blessing. This time with no book, just a thin candle and a piece of wool. He lays it across the threshold. Step over together, he says. Leave behind your old selves. You do, but only because the path forward is narrower than the one behind. As night falls, Harwin closes the shutters. He lights a single lamp. The silence grows thick. You lie beside him fully clothed. He does not touch you. You do not speak. Somehow that feels like mercy. You fall asleep thinking of the ash tree, of wool and whispered prayers, and a voice in your head says quietly, "You are wife." And something deeper replies, "But I am still me." The days that follow are both strange and dull. You wake before the sun kneel to stoke the fire boil oat sweep ashes. You slice root vegetables and wipe down tools that don't belong to you, yet must now be kept by you. Harwin leaves early muttering about orders and tanning vats. He returns just before dusk, hands stained dark with dye, his scent a blend of smoke and boiled leather. He eats quietly, thanks you without looking up, and falls asleep still wearing his work tunic. You wonder if this is it. Not in despair, just bafflement, because for all the ceremony and wool and wine marriage so far feels a lot like housework. There is no fanfare, no thunderclap of change, just laundry. Your mother visits after 3 days. She eyes the hearth, the floor, the food. She nods approvingly. Then she leans in and asks one quiet question. Has it happened? You hesitate. She sees it. Her face stiffens. He'll expect it. Don't delay. Delay invites insult. You want to ask, what if I'm not ready? What if he's not kind? What if the idea of being touched makes my stomach turn sideways? But all you say is, I understand. She doesn't stay long. After she leaves, you find yourself standing in the garden, staring at the cabbage rows. Not working, just existing. Trying to feel the earth beneath your feet. Trying to feel anything that isn't numb. Harwin returns that evening with a gift, a wooden comb. Not as fine as the first, but clearly made by his hand. The dog chewed the other, he says. It's almost an apology. Or a peace offering. You thank him. He nods. And again silence. That night you sleep side by side. The space between you might as well be a river. Until suddenly it isn't. It begins with a hand on your shoulder. Light, tentative, testing. You freeze. He speaks barely above a whisper, I won't, if you don't want to. You blink into the dark. Is this kindness? Is this a trap? Is this just another transaction softened by tone? You don't respond. You roll away. He doesn't press. And for that you silently thank every saint with an ear for exhausted girls. Historians often describe medieval marriage as a conjugal contract, a binding not only of property, but of bodies. A woman's duty was to render the marriage debt a polite way of saying she owed access. Theologians debated whether affection should be present. Many agreed it was irrelevant. Some records exist of women petitioning for separation on grounds of cruelty or impotence, but those cases were rare and rarely won. In your world, no is a ghost word. It exists but can't be caught. Still, Harwin doesn't force the question. Instead, he offers something else, quiet routine. He brings wood without being asked. He rinses his tools so they don't rot the basin. He lets you speak first, if at all. It's not love, but it's not terror. One afternoon, as you scrub a bucket near the stream, a woman passes by and smiles. You're still upright, she jokes. That's more than most can say a week in. You smile back, but weakly. That night, Harwin brings home dried cherries. No explanation, no fanfare. Just sets them in a bowl and mutters, "They're sweet." You eat one. It is. Later, he asks if you want the window shutter open or closed. It's a small thing. But it's the first question you've been asked since the wedding that wasn't about salt or laundry. You say open, and he opens it. The breeze is cool. The moonlight touches the walls gently. You sleep better that night. And in the morning, you wake before him listening to his breathing, steady, coarse reel. You look at his calloused hand resting near yours, and you wonder, is this what they meant by union? Not fire, not fate, but a strange slow settling into shared space. Later that day, an elder passes by and comments you've gained colour in your cheeks. The married life agrees with you. You smile because it's easier than explaining the truth. You're not sure what this life is yet, but you're learning the shape of it. You carry water without spilling. You season the broth just enough. You speak when necessary. And sometimes, not always, you breathe a little deeper than before. Market day arrives with the kind of clamour that can wake even the dead, or at least the dead tired. Harwin rises early, gathers his leathers tools and a few belts he's stitched with care. You should come, he says, without looking at you. It's good for folks to see us together. Us. A curious word, that. You nod, braid your hair and wrap your shawl tightly around your shoulders. It's a cool morning, and the air smells of damp hay and horses. The road to the village is muddy, riddled with boot prints and cart grooves. You walk beside Harwin, not behind him. Not quite beside him either. Just nearby. When you arrive, the square is already alive. Traders, livestock, shouting boys. Someone's selling apples by the basket. Another waves smoked fish like a flag of war. Children run with reckless joy, and women cluster near bolts of cloth gossiping between silver hairpins and turnip prices. But as you pass, you feel the eyes. Some curious, some judging, some calculating. You're not just Harwin's wife now, you're a part of his presentation, his shop sign, his sales pitch, his proof of stability. The fact that you're quiet, clean, and not currently weeping earns approving glances from at least 3 neighbouring women. You help him set up the stall, arranging leather pouches by size belts, by colour knives at a discreet angle. Then you stand behind him, hands clasped, trying not to look like livestock on display. A merchant's daughter walks by and smirks. Her name is Lyneth. You knew her once in a way. She used to pull your braids when you sat near her at market. Now she carries herself like she owns the road. Her gown is dyed a shade of blue that whispers wealth with every hem swing. She glances at you, then Harwin, then back at you. You feel small, Harwin notices. Ignore her, he mutters. Her father's shop smells like boiled feet. It's the closest thing to humour you've heard from him. And just like that you laugh quiet, surprised. He looks at you sideways. There it is, he says. Your voice. And you realise this is the first time he's heard you laugh. The market swells with customers. Harwin sells 3 belts, 2 pouches and a pair of gloves before noon. You fetch water, collect coins, and try not to wince when a man you don't know says, "Pretty thing, this one." "Where'd you catch her?" Harwin doesn't respond. But later he hands you a small pouch of honeyed nuts and says, "You don't have to talk to fools." You nod. You eat them slowly. A woman nearby, older round in the face and dressed in faded linen, asks your name. You tell her. She nods. Saw your wedding from a distance. Good binding ceremony. You didn't cry. That's worth something. You want to say, "I cried later." You want to say, "I'm still crying, just more quietly." But you only smile. She offers you a bunch of lavender. "For your hearth," she says. Keeps the bad dreams out. You accept it. Tuck it into your shawl. Thank her. As the afternoon wanes, you take a short walk behind the stalls. The sun is high, but the alleys are cool. And in one corner by a crumbling stone wall, you see something that stops your breath. A girl. Younger than you. Eyes, dark hair, dishevelled, sitting on a barrel and speaking to a man twice her age. He's leaning too close. Her hands twist in her lap. She's nodding, but her eyes say no. You recognise that look. You've worn it. You start to step forward, but then she glances up, locks eyes with you and shakes her head. Not angrily, just resigned. You stop. Because in this world, rescue isn't always welcomed. Historians sometimes talk about the invisible marketplace, where girls are offered not officially but through suggestion. A father hints, a mother mentions, a man asks, once, twice, insists, and a girl's path narrows. You return to the stall in silence. Harwin's packing up. He glances at you. You all right? You nod. He says nothing else. On the way home he doesn't speak. You don't either. But when you pass the bend near the woods where the wind stirs the trees, just so you say softly, "There was a girl today." Harwin nods. There's always a girl. And that feels heavier than any silence. At home you place the lavender above the hearth. You light a candle. You watch the flame. And you whisper not to saints, not to gods, but to yourself, "Stay kind, even when the world teaches you otherwise." Night settles over the cottage like a blanket worn thin at the edges. You sit near the hearth, spinning flax with slow fingers, the rhythm almost enough to drown out the dull ache in your shoulders. Harwin is outside, feeding the goat and muttering about wolves. The shadows stretch long against the walls, dancing softly to the flicker of firelight. Everything is quiet but not peaceful. And then your mother's voice returns to you like a whisper through the smoke. Listen to the women. They're the only ones who'll tell you the truth. So you do. You start paying attention not just to what's said, but to what's not. The way Harwin's aunt pauses before saying the word child. The way the midwife's eyes linger on your belly when you come to fetch herbs. The way your neighbour woman Edla, who's had 7 children and buried 2 grips your wrist a little too hard when you pass her the ladle at the well. You're thin, she says. You need broth. A womb starves faster than a mouth. You smile and nod, but inside the words rattle. Everything now leads back to one thing: fertility. You are not just a wife. You are a vessel. The expectation hangs heavy like wet wool, and though no one says it outright, their glances do. You begin to notice patterns. How often you're asked about your appetite, whether your back aches, whether you've felt fluttering. You've barely been married a fortnight. Still, you're already behind. That evening you sit with your mother-in-law peeling roots for stew. She doesn't talk much, never has. But now her voice breaks the silence. When I was your age, she says I was already heavy with my second. You glance up. Her face is unreadable, her hands moving with mechanical ease. You don't reply. She doesn't expect you to. Because this, like so many things, is not a conversation. It's a directive in disguise. Later, Harwin returns from the tannery. His hands are stained deeper than usual. He eats without comment, washes without complaint. Then just as he's blowing out the candle, he pauses. Are you feeling well? He asks. It's not romantic. It's not even particularly gentle. But it's something. You murmur yes. He hesitates, then lies down beside you. And for the first time you wonder if he's waiting too. Not with pressure, just with expectation. A quiet hope that something is beginning. You don't know what to do with that. So you sleep. In the morning, you wake early and take the long route to the well. You pass the midwife's hut where smoke rises steadily from the chimney. You think about stopping in, asking questions you can't quite say aloud. But you don't. You keep walking. At the well, you meet your sister. Not your real sister, your cousin Mira, who once taught you how to steal jam and blame the cat. She's unmarried still, though not for lack of offers. She wears red ribbon in her hair and speaks with a confidence that makes men uncomfortable. She hugs you tightly, then pulls back and studies your face. They're waiting on a belly, she says flatly. You nod. You want it, she asks. You don't answer. She reaches into her satchel and pulls out a bundle of dried herbs tied in blue thread. For when you do, she says, or for when you don't. You know what she means. Moonwort, mugwort, pennyroyal. Whispers of autonomy wrapped in cloth. She presses it into your hand. No one sees. Back home you place the bundle behind the firewood. And you breathe. That night you listen to the wind outside and think of choices. Not big ones, not the kind that change history. Just the quiet ones. The ones that say maybe not tonight. Or maybe not ever. You think of Mira, of Edla, of the women who survived and the ones who didn't. And you whisper, not yet. Harwin turns in his sleep. You roll to face the window. Outside the moon rises full and pale. Inside, you are still a mystery wrapped in linen and expectation. But your heart beats steady. And somewhere deep within a small part of you says my body, my breath, my time. The first frost of the season bites into the village with little warning. You wake to a window pane clouded with ice, the edges patterned like lace. Outside, the grass glitters like crushed glass under the morning sun, and smoke curls from chimneys like tired sighs. Harwin is already up, shoulders hunched beneath his wool coat, chopping firewood with steady practice swings. You watch him from the doorway, your shawl pulled tight, the cold licking your ankles. Today you've been summoned not by your mother, not by the midwife, but by Harwin's uncle. A man you've never spoken to directly. A man whose boots cost more than your entire dowry. You walk to his cottage slowly, your breath fogging the air, heart ticking faster than your steps. The door creaks as you enter, revealing a man with sharp eyes and fingers stained with ink. His home smells of parchment and old wine. He motions to the chair across from him. You sit. He clears his throat. And then he begins, it's time we talked about land. Ah, so that's what this is. Not concern. Not care. Politics. You blink. He continues. Your name has now become part of a property puzzle. The plot of land behind Harwin's shop. The path near the watermill. A boundary stone moved 2 years ago that caused a dispute with the neighbours. And your marriage, that's part of the solution. You're the glue you see, he says. You don't see, but you nod anyway. Historians often write about noble marriages as treaties a daughter traded to halt war, to secure land, to promise peace. But what they sometimes overlook is that peasants did the same thing, just on a smaller scale. A cow instead of a castle, a stream instead of a river, but the stakes just as real. By the time the conversation ends, you've agreed to nothing, but everything has been decided. As you leave, Harwin's uncle pats your shoulder. You're doing well, girl. Keep quiet and you'll go far. You smile with your teeth. Then you go straight to the stream. It's half frozen now, the surface thin with ice. You crouch beside it, fingers tucked under your arms for warmth, and breathe out slowly. The water whispers secrets, and you listen. Because here's what no one tells you behind the veil of marriage is strategy. You're not just a wife. You're a hinge, a keystone, a thread stitched into a larger cloth you never asked to be part of. That afternoon, Harwin brings home a letter. Not written by him, he can't read. But someone sent it, and someone read it aloud. It's from a cousin in the next village. There's talk of a property line, a debt, a possible visit, a need to show strength. He shrugs, just formal stuff. But you see the tension in his jaw. You see the way he polishes his boots more carefully. And then 2 days later you're told to prepare. Not for a guest, for a journey. To your kin's village, Harwin says, so they can see the match for themselves. You nod, but your hands tremble, because you know what this really is, a political parade. A proofing. You're to be displayed, measured again, laughed at or praised, depending on whether your shawl matches your shoes and whether your voice trembles too much when you greet the elders. You pack carefully only 2 dresses, your comb, your gloves, the stone from Jorah. You tuck the blue threaded herb bundle deeper just in case. The ride is slow and cold. Harwin sits beside you in the cart, silent hands resting on his knees. You don't speak, but somewhere between the moss-covered stones and the leafless hedges he says they'll ask about children. You nod. He glances sideways. You can say we're trying. You say nothing? He sighs, or don't say anything. That's fine too. It surprises you, that hint of choice, that flicker of awareness, that maybe beneath the routines and quiet nights he knows this game too. When you arrive, the cottage is bigger than you expected. The kin are warmer than expected. There's food on the table cider in mugs, a dog that sleeps beneath your chair. It almost feels human, until the questions begin. So, swollen yet? Has she bled since? Good teeth on this one. I hope the baby gets a smile. Each comment lands like a pebble in your lap. You don't flinch, but you grow heavier with each one. They don't ask about your thoughts, your voice, your days, just your belly, your usefulness. And when you finally slip outside for air alone beneath a gnarled apple tree, a girl your age follows. She's Harwin's cousin, round-faced, freckled, with clever eyes. She says, don't worry, they ask everyone that. You say, do they ever stop? She grins. Only when the baby arrives. Then they ask when the next one is coming. You both laugh. It's the kind that ends quickly. She hands you a peeled apple slice. You'll be fine, she says. You're sharper than most. You take it, bite. The sweetness is sudden. The sun dips low. You go back inside. You survive the dinner. You endure the stairs. And by the time you climb into the guest bed beside Harwin, your body aches not from work, but from being watched. Still, he doesn't press. And when you roll away from him that night, he whispers, if they ask tomorrow, you don't have to smile. You don't reply. But for the first time in weeks, you dream of something other than escape. The sun rises slow and honey-coloured over the thatched rooftops, casting long lines through the frost-dusted windows. You wake early, the kind of early that feels like you've only just blinked shut your eyes. Harwin is already up, stepping quietly across the wooden floor, gathering his boots. He doesn't speak. Neither do you. The silence is no longer hostile. It's become a habit. Downstairs, the fire is already lit. His kin are bustling with the kind of tension that only comes with visitors or trouble. You aren't sure which you are. The cousin from last night, Freya, grins at you over a pot of porridge, still breathing, good sign. You eat in silence. The porridge is hot and plain. You chew and count the sounds in the room chairs, scraping spoons, clinking your own shallow breathing. By midday, the questioning resumes. This time it's gentler, wrapped in smiles, passed across the table like second helpings. So, what are her skills? Does she pray before bed? Can she sew a straight line? How are her hips? You answer the way you've been taught. Polite nods, modest smiles, careful words, not too clever, not too quiet. They nod back satisfied. And then, without warning, it comes. Has the marriage been consummated? You freeze. Harwin does too. The question is tossed like a breadcrumb as if it's no more consequential than the weather. No shame, no weight, just social inventory. His aunt watches you carefully, her eyes sharp behind the lines of age. You look to Harwin. He clears his throat. Yes, he says. You blink. Because the truth is no. Not really. Not yet. But here now, truth bends to expectation. The room relaxes. Heads nod. Spoons lift. Someone toasts to healthy beginnings. The question floats away unchallenged, swallowed by cider and cloverleaf biscuits. Later you slip outside. Your hands shake, not with fear but confusion. You lean against the wall of the barn, the boards warm from sun and age, and breathe. Freya finds you there, of course. She always does. He lied for you, she says softly. You don't respond. She adds, that's something, not everything, but something. You nod, though your mind is elsewhere. You've been told your whole life that marriage begins on the wedding night, that once the sheets are stained and the vows sealed, you become a wife in body, not just in name. But here you are, named, nodded at, passed over in conversation, and still untouched. It's disorienting, like walking across a bridge that hasn't been built yet. That night you lie awake and watch Harwin's back rise and fall. The fire has long since died. The only light is the silver haze of moon through the window. You whisper, why did you lie? He stirs, doesn't turn. Then after a long pause, they respect what they understand, not what's real. You watch the moonlight shift across his shoulder. You ask, what do you want from me? He replies, not what they want. You're quiet. Then, but what do you want? His breath catches, and then he says, almost like a confession piece, someone who doesn't yell, a home without eggshells on the floor. You understand that more than you should. In the quiet that follows, you realise something strange. Harwin never asked to be part of the marketplace either. Not the emotional one, not the political one. He too was traded, expected to take a wife, make a family, tend a trade. He just happened to do it with more shoes. The next morning you leave early. Your satchel is lighter than when you came. You left the lavender bundle under Freya's pillow. She'll know what it means. Harwin walks beside you again. Still no hand-holding. But you don't need it. When you return to your cottage, the first thing you notice is the smell. Not bad, just yours. The way the ashes fall in the hearth. The small wooden spoon you carved last week. The row of drying herbs you picked without asking anyone's permission. You unpack slowly, carefully. Then you reach into your bag and pull out the apple seed you saved from Freya's orchard. Small, brown, unassuming. You dig a tiny hole in the back garden just near the edge of the fence. And you plant it. You don't say anything over it. You don't expect it to grow. But it's something. Yours. The chill sharpens with each passing morning. Frost bites deeper into the edges of your shawl and the smell of snow lingers faintly in the air, even though the skies remain blue. The village grows quieter in the cold markets, thin-out children move less, and the hens cluck only when necessary. Even the goats seem to mutter less. You too have become quieter, not by force but by settling. Not submission, something gentler. You're learning to move through the silence, not against it. One day, as you clean the hearth, Harwin mentions a convent. Cousin's girl was sent there, he says, tossing kindling into the fire. Said she wanted peace, or freedom, or maybe just different rules. You pause, look up. What happened to her, you ask? He shrugs. She learned to copy prayers and mix inks. She writes letters for noblewomen now. In Latin. He doesn't say it with scorn, just curiosity. You sweep the ashes into the pan, your hands steady. I used to want that, you admit. The quiet. The books. He nods. So did I. You blink. He chuckles. Not the books, the quiet. The conversation dies there, like most between you, but it leaves something behind. A thought. A flicker. A door in the wall. Later, when you walk to the well, you pass by the tiny chapel at the edge of the village. You rarely notice it, but today something draws your eyes. A girl stands outside, cloaked in grey, brushing snow off the stone steps. She can't be older than 12. Her hands are raw red at the knuckles. She sees you and nods once curt, but not unfriendly. You nod back. Inside the chapel, smells of old incense and damp stone. The air is heavier here, weighted by whispered prayers and long silences. A priest kneels near the altar lips, moving eyes closed. You keep your distance. On the back wall, a carved image of St. Hilda watches. She holds a book in one hand, a shepherd's crook in the other. Beneath her feet a serpent curls, subdued, but not slain. You stand there for a long time. Not praying, just thinking. A convent once seemed like escape. As a child, you imagined it as a fortress, no husbands, no childbirth, just women and candles and the hush of learning. But now, you understand what that life truly is. Not freedom, but a different kind of binding. Historians write of medieval convents as sanctuaries and prisons alike. For some women, they were the only chance to study to lead. Abbesses wielded power, rivaling minor lords. For others, they were a place to be forgotten, hidden away when dowries failed or behaviour broke rules. You leave the chapel with your hands colder than before, and yet the silence felt familiar, comforting. Back at home, Harwin is mending a strap. His hands move with the same rhythm you've come to recognise, purposeful, economical, but with care. You sit beside him, your sewing in hand. For once, you speak first. What would you do if you hadn't married? He glances up. Be alone. Would that be better? He thinks a long time before answering. Not better, but simpler. You nod. Would you have joined the church? He snorts. Me, I'd set something on fire during the first fast. You both laugh. It surprises you. And then gently he asks, would you have gone to the convent? You nod slowly. I might have. He studies you. Would you still? The air between you shifts. You look down at your hands, the way they move, the way they work, the way they've grown used to a kind of peace. Quiet, imperfect, uncertain, but livable. I don't know, you whisper. He leans back against the wall. That's honest. You both fall into quiet. That night you dream of parchment, ink-stained fingers, a room full of whispers and a bell that never stops ringing. When you wake, you reach for your bundle of herbs and feel the dried stalks crackle between your fingers. Still there. Still yours. You rise, dress slowly, and step outside. The sky is pale and clear, and the first snow has begun to fall, just a dusting soft and uncertain. You walk to the garden and check on the spot where you planted the apple seed. The soil is hard. Still you kneel, and you press your fingers to the earth. Not yet, you whisper. Maybe not ever. But the seed is there. And that matters. Winter tightens its grip like a slow, steady hand closing over the village. The days are short now. Light fades before you've finished your second chore. The sun barely stretches over the rooftops, and every sound carries farther in the brittle air. The world becomes quiet, huddled, cautious. Inside your cottage, the hearth never rests. The fire becomes a third presence in your marriage, always crackling, always watching. You and Harwin take turns feeding it, tending it, speaking softly around it, like it might judge you for raising your voice. There's something about winter that makes people feel smaller, but it also brings things closer. You spend more time indoors now together. There's less room for avoidance. No garden to weed, no errands long enough to swallow the day. Just two people and a dozen silences between them. One evening, as snow falls like sifted flour outside the window, Harwin brings out a game board. Simple flat wood with carved holes, a pouch of smooth stones. He teaches you how to play. You lose the first 3 rounds. Then you win. He doesn't pretend to let you. You laugh, genuinely. He smiles, not the half-smile you've seen before, but a full one, sheepish and warm. Something shifts. Later, as you sew near the fire, he says, I was afraid you'd hate me. You pause. Why? He shrugs. Because I'm not what you wanted. You don't know how to answer that. Not because he's wrong, but because the truth is murkier than want. You reply, I didn't know what I wanted. He nods. That's worse. You both laugh again. It's strange how laughter can feel like truce. That night you sit closer beneath the same blanket. He doesn't reach for you, and you don't offer. But the closeness is intentional now, not accidental. You feel his warmth at your back, steady and slow. Not possessive. Not demanding. Just human. In the dark, you whisper, do you ever feel trapped? He exhales, every day. Then after a pause, but not by you, you swallow hard, because that lands deep. Historians often describe peasant marriages as practical arrangements, 2 workers bound by necessity. And yes, it's true, love was rarely part of the negotiation. But within the silence of these bonds there was room for something else. Not romance, maybe, but something gentler. A companionship carved from proximity, familiarity and effort. And yet, not everyone finds that space. The next day, you go to visit Tella. She married young, younger than you. Her husband is older, his hands rougher, his voice louder. You know the rumours. You knock. She answers with one eye slightly swollen. You don't ask. She doesn't explain. Instead, she pulls you in and brews tea. You sit by her hearth while she adds nettle and clove to the water. She talks about soup, about firewood. about how hard it is to dry laundry in this weather. She doesn't mention the bruise. Until finally she says, "They think we forget who we were." You look at her. Her lip quivers. "They think we disappear once we wear the ring tie, the not change the name." You nod slowly. She continues, voice low, "But I haven't forgotten. Not yet. Not fully." You don't offer comfort. You just sit beside her. Because sometimes what we need most isn't advice, it's witness. She gives you a small bundle before you leave, a square of cloth stitched in red. The corners are knotted with patterns you recognize from your childhood, a secret code passed through generations of women. You tuck it into your shawl, say nothing. That evening back home, Harwin is making stew. He's humming. Not a tune, you know. Probably one he doesn't even realize he's doing. You place the cloth in your drawer beside the comb, the gloves, the stone, and the herb bundle. Then you help with the stew. You salt it without asking. He doesn't correct you. Later you eat beside the fire, knees touching. He tells you about a neighbour whose cow wandered into the tannery and came out purple. You laugh so hard you spill your broth. He grins like he's just won something important. And maybe he has. Maybe you both have. Not love, not yet, but something real. And in a world where your name has been traded, your blood discussed, your belly watched, real might be the most precious thing of all. The snow finally comes in earnest. Not the scattered, half-hearted flakes of early frost, but a real snowfall, heavy and quiet, the kind that hushes a whole village. By morning, the world is white and still. Paths vanish. Roofs disappear beneath thick quilts of ice. Even the hens seem stunned. You stand at the doorway, wrapped in two shawls, watching the wind toss flakes like ash. Harwin stands beside you, mug in hand, rubbing the back of his neck. "We won't get to market for a while," he mutters. "No carts going through that." You nod. He turns inside and you follow, each of you carrying something invisible. He carries concern about coin, you carry concern about breath. Because with snow comes time, stillness, reflection, and as the days stretch on, so too does the quiet. There's something about being trapped indoors that makes you examine every inch of yourself. You sweep the same corners, stir the same stew, patch the same torn sock 3 times just to keep your hands moving. You begin to wonder, have you disappeared? Have you become what they wanted, a woman shaped by walls and routine? You stare at your reflection in the copper pot and barely recognize your own eyes. One evening as the wind howls and the fire cracks too loud, Harwin pulls out a book. You blink. "I didn't know you had that," you say. He shrugs. "I can't read it, but my cousin gave it to me, said it had drawings." He hands it over. And he's right there are drawings. Simple, sketched in faded ink. Saints, seeds, a moon chart, a woman holding a bundle of grain. You flip through slowly, your finger tracing each image like a map. Harwin watches. "You can read," he asks. You nod. Some, not Latin, but letters. He raises his eyebrows, impressed. "My mother never taught us." "My cousin, did you say, before she married off to a shoemaker who hated books?" You stare at the page again, a woman standing beside a cow, a hand raised not in prayer but in offering. It's not a saint, you know. She has no halo, just soft eyes and bare feet. You whisper more to yourself than him. She looks like someone who knows things. He leans over. "You should copy that. We could hang it above the hearth." You blink at him. Copy it. Like it's allowed, like it's yours. So you do. You spend the next morning carving it gently into wood, just enough to capture the shape. Harwin makes a simple frame. It's crooked, but it holds. Together you hang it above the hearth. She watches over you now, your quiet saint, your own invention. That afternoon, Harwin takes out the stitching you taught him and begins repairing a pouch. You hum a tune you learned from Mira, one with no words, one that feels like winter trying to remember spring. He joins in off-key but earnest. The next day, while gathering snow to melt for water, you meet Freya again. She trudges toward you through the drift like a bear wrapped in 5 blankets. She hands you a folded note. Inside, you've made it farther than most. You smile. On the back, but don't forget who you were. You don't. That night you go through your drawer. The stone, the herb bundle, the red-stitched cloth. You add something new, the carved saint. Not because she's sacred, because she's yours. Historians speak often of saints and relics in medieval homes, but rarely do they talk about the saints, women made for themselves, the ones who never made it into books but lived in corners, ovens and bread loaves. Your saint has no name, but she watches you stir soup, kiss your cold fingers and fold the linens. She is enough. One night Harwin rolls over and touches your hand, not like a command, not even a request, just a question. You don't pull away, not because you're ready, but because you're safe for now. You whisper, "I still remember who I am." He nods. Good. And for a moment you believe him. The first signs of spring come like secrets. A puddle here no longer frozen. A patch of earth soft enough to press a heel into. A single bird call that cuts through the morning silence like a thread tugging at your memory. You hear it, while hanging damp linens on the line, and for a moment you stop. You just stand there, breath puffing in the cool air listening, and you remember what it felt like to run barefoot through a field, before you were a wife, before you were watched, before your value had a number. Inside the cottage the fire burns lower now. Harwin is mending a satchel, eyes narrowed, lips slightly pursed in concentration. You've begun to see him differently, not better, not worse, just real. Less outline, more detail. Later that day, he hands you something wrapped in cloth. For planting, he says. You open it carefully. Inside 3 small seed packets, beans, carrots, and lavender. You blink. You remembered, you say. He shrugs. You always look calm when you were near herbs. You smile, and for once it doesn't feel borrowed. As the ground softens, you begin to dig. At first, it's slow, your muscles have grown used to winter's stillness, but soon you find your rhythm. You clear the old row. You check on the spot where you buried the apple seed. No sprout yet, but the earth smells alive. That's enough. And as you plant the lavender, something inside you unknots slowly. That night, you and Harwin sit side by side, with your feet near the fire, sharing a bowl of warm stew. No one speaks. There's nothing pressing to say. But the silence between you feels full, not hollow. A kind of quiet earned through many cold months and careful boundaries. Then softly Harwin says, "My cousin died last spring. His wife inherited the land." You glance at him. He had no brothers, just her, and they let it stay in her name. That's rare, you say. He nods, but not impossible. You stir the broth. Why are you telling me this? He doesn't answer right away. Then, because if anything ever happens to me, I want it to be yours. You go very still. The fire crackles, and all you can say is all right. Not because you're ready to talk about death or land or legacy, but because you're beginning to understand something bigger. That you are not only a wife, you are a player in a game most think you don't understand. One that deals in fields names memory, and memory you're learning is power. The next week you're invited to the gathering for widows. It's not as morbid as it sounds. In the village the widows meet once a season to share bread trade scraps and speak plainly. You're not one of them, but you're allowed to listen. They sit in a circle wrapped in shawls, faces weathered but bright. One woman, Marta, tells the story of how she faked illness for 3 weeks so she wouldn't have to sleep with her second husband. Everyone laughs. Another, Lynn, says she buried a silver coin under her threshold and never had mice again. One murmurs, "I buried a husband there." Everyone laughs harder. They speak with a freedom you've never heard, because widowhood for them is not grief, it's graduation. You ask, "Do you miss them?" They pause. Then Lynn says, "Sometimes, like a splinter you forget is still in your finger." You stay quiet. You watch. You listen. And you learn. On the way home, you stop by the chapel again. St. Hilda still stands in her carving, still watching, still silent. But you swear she looks more like you now. That evening, Harwin hands you a piece of parchment. "I made something," he says. It's a will, or his version of one, scrawled by the neighbour boy who can write signed with an ink thumbprint. It names you. Only you. You sit beside him by the fire, the paper in your lap, and for once you speak plainly. "I'm not with child." He nods. "I don't know if I will be." "I know." "You still want me to have the land?" "Yes." You don't thank him. Instead you say, "You're not what I feared." He exhales slowly. You either. Outside the wind has changed. And you begin to understand sometimes survival isn't resistance. It's redefinition. You stir the stew. You stack the wood. You light the fire with your own 2 hands. And tomorrow you will plant the carrots. Spring thickens. Not just in the air, but in the ground beneath your feet. Mud pulls at your shoes now. Birds return in pairs, noisy and frantic, with twigs in their beaks. The garden sprouts tiny defiant greens, and the scent of damp earth follows you like a shawl. You find yourself outside more often. Sometimes with purpose, checking the rows, fetching water, but often without. You just stand there, sleeves rolled, sun on your skin, breathing. There's something healing about the way light returns to the world, like the season itself is an apology for everything that came before. Harwin watches you through the window. You catch him sometimes, but he doesn't look away. He lets you know he sees you not just as a function or a wife or a role, but as a whole person again. That's new, and you let him see. In town, the talk is shifting. Everyone is planning. Crops, markets, repairs, children grow louder with the warmth, chickens wander farther, and in the middle of it all a new girl appears, Maera. She's barely 13, newly arrived from another village, cheeks, still soft eyes, sharp with fear. You know the look. You've worn it. They say she's betrothed. You watch her at the well one morning, twisting the hem of her tunic, avoiding the older women's glances. You approach, slowly offer her a seat near the stones, and pull a piece of dried lavender from your pouch. She sniffs it, then smiles. You don't talk about marriage. You talk about seeds. Soft things. Things that don't require explanation. Because you've learned sometimes survival begins with quiet alliances. She sees the stitchwork on your shawl, the red thread, the old symbols. She asks what it means. You say it means I remember. She doesn't ask what you remember. She just nods. Later that week, the village hosts the first spring market. It's modest, mostly root vegetables and smoked meat, but it feels like a festival. You walk through the stalls, familiar faces calling out prices, smoke rising from roasting fish. You find Mira there, arms full of garlic. She pulls you aside. I heard you're planting lavender again. You nod. She presses a folded cloth into your hands. For the roots. Wrap it around the base. Keeps away pests. You thank her. Then she says quieter, you look, well, you say I'm not. And then, but I'm better. She smiles. Better is rare, she says. At home, Harwin has set up a makeshift table outside. He's carving again, not for trade, just to pass the time. This time it's a spoon, but he's trying to shape the handle like a vine. You sit beside him and begin shelling peas. He pauses. Then the girl at the well. She reminded me of you. You nod. She reminded me of me too. He looks at the carving. Then, were you scared? You exhale, terrified. He nods. You don't need to say more. Historians often describe the medieval marriage system as transactional, but they miss the quiet transformations that happen within it. The tiny rebellions, the unspoken understandings, the ways women carved out peace in places never meant for it. You weren't meant to become yourself, but somehow you did. That night, Maera knocks on your door. You're surprised. She holds out a bundle, dried bark roots, some crushed flour. I don't know what they do, she says, but they smell like home. You smile and pull her inside. Harwin makes tea. You sit near the fire, all three of you, and for a moment it feels like something more than survival. It feels like inheritance, not of land, of knowing. Knowing how to stay, how to see, how to hold the line between what's taken and what's kept. After Maera leaves, Harwin says you'd make a good teacher. You raise an eyebrow. You want me preaching at the chapel? He chuckles. No, just people trust you. You poke at the fire. Maybe because I don't ask for anything in return. He shrugs. Or maybe because you remember what it's like not to be trusted. That makes you pause. You press the cloth Mira gave you against your chest, and you realize something you hadn't noticed before. You're not surviving anymore. You're rooting, like the lavender in your garden. Stubborn, small, but alive. The lavender blooms by midsummer. Tiny violet tufts, pushing their way through the dirt upright and fragrant. You crouch beside them in the late afternoon light, fingers gently brushing along the blossoms. The scent rises warm and sharp, familiar in a way that aches. You close your eyes just for a moment. You remember your cousin's garden. You remember laughter before duty. You remember someone whispering, hold on to the things that smell like you. You didn't understand it then. You do now. Behind you, Harwin is chopping wood. Each strike rings out across the yard in slow, even rhythm. He's gotten better at it. No wasted energy, no missed aim. Like most things this past year, he's learned by doing. You rise, brushing your palms on your apron, and carry a small bundle of lavender back to the house. Inside, the air is cooler. The shutters are cracked open, letting in just enough breeze. You tie the flowers together and hang them by the window near the spot where sunlight puddles in the morning. It's the same window where you once cried alone your first month here, certain your life was over. Now it's where you stand to grind herbs, where you and Harwin share tea, where you taught Maera to braid rosemary into thread. Things change. You change. The villagers speak of you differently now. Not with awe, not with scandal, but with curiosity. She's strange, one says. But the strange ones are often safest with secrets. She's lucky, another mutters. Her husband listens. But you know better. It wasn't luck. It was slow erosion. It was tending like earth after winter. It was not screaming. It was surviving long enough to speak. And now you speak. Not loudly, but clearly. One afternoon the local midwife falls ill. She's old bones thin as willow hands, like feathers but sharp in the mind. When they ask who should help in her place, someone says your name. You hesitate. Then say yes. The first woman you tend to is Mira's cousin giving birth to her second child. You arrive with a satchel of cloth and Herb's hands trembling. The mother moans. The aunt panics. Mira just squeezes your wrist and says, "You know more than you think." And you do. The baby is born screaming. You clean it gently, bundle it and whisper, "Welcome to a messy world." They name her Ilsa. You carry that name like a gift all the way home. That night, Harwin listens as you describe the birth. He asks, "Were you scared?" You nod. "Terrified." "Did you cry?" You think, "No," but my hands shook. He chuckles. That counts. Then he grows quiet. And finally says you've changed. You meet his gaze. Is that bad? He shakes his head slowly. "No. I think I finally know you." You smile slow and careful. So do I. The next morning you wake early and head to the edge of the village. There in the clearing behind the last fence Maera waits. She carries her bundle of bark and flowers, her shawl slipping from one shoulder. You sit together beneath the ash tree, and you teach her, not spells, not medicine, not even wisdom, just how to notice. The sky's colour before rain, the way lavender leans toward water, the warmth of a stone that's held a story. Historians might never write your names. They might never see the women who stitched herbs into sleeves, who raised children not born of their own wombs, who taught with nothing more than presence and patience. But here in this clearing you exist. Fully. No title. No transaction. Just two humans passing on quiet resilience. Before you leave, Myra gives you a small stone carved with a spiral. "Like your saint," she says. You press it to your heart. And in that moment, beneath the dappled shade, the lavender behind you humming with bees, you finally feel it. You were never a pawn. You were the seed. Buried, yes, but waiting. The sky changes first. You notice it not in colour, but in weight, the way it stretches longer at the edges of evening, the way the breeze grows playful again. The sun lingers like a visitor reluctant to leave. You begin to lose track of hours because the shadows don't behave the way they did in winter. And your body, ever loyal to the seasons, responds in kind. You rise earlier, eat less stew, crave more salt. You begin trading lavender bundles for eggs at the edge of the village. Not because you have to Harwin's tools still bring coin, but because it feels good to offer something you made. Something pulled from the soil by your own hands. Mira notices. "You walk differently now," she says one morning while tying off a hen's feet. Differently how? Like someone who knows where she's going, even if the path isn't clear yet. You blink at that, not because she's wrong, but because it might be the first time in your life someone said you were going somewhere. And meant it. The village is bracing for harvest, though it's still weeks away. Tools are being repaired, roofs patched, old debts whispered over cups of weak ale. The priest is already preparing sermons about gratitude and toil. You catch him practicing under his breath. It's always toil with him, but you're noticing something new now. Beneath the toil, women laugh. At night, by the river, behind the church, when no one's watching, there's a rhythm to it, a rebellion that needs no name. One day, you and Maera are sorting dried mint when she asks, "Why do they always say wives must be quiet?" You look up. You don't answer right away. Then because they know we're loud inside. She grins. Then I'm thunder. You pause, then say good. Be a storm when the time comes. The days pass. The rows in your garden thicken thick with basil and carrots and thyme. You begin experimenting with salves, mixing beeswax and steeped leaves. Harwin tests them for blisters. Mira uses one for her son's scraped elbow. They work. You don't call them potions. Just care. One afternoon, an elder named Bera visits. She's the one with the long braid that touches her belt, and the voice that never shakes even in the chapel. She asks to see your garden. You oblige. She crouches low by the rosemary, touches the stems, then looks up at you. You remember the old ways, she says. You shrug. They remembered me first. She smiles a slow, sun-wrinkled smile that feels older than the trees. You keep tending, she says. The world needs more soft things that bite when stepped on. Then she's gone. Just like that. And somehow you feel knighted. One night Harwin returns later than usual, mud on his boots, brow furrowed. He pours water over his hands, then sits by the fire without a word. You bring him stew? He stares at it for a while, then says, "There's a man in town. Says Maera's family promised her." You set the bowl down. To whom? He names a name you hate, Branrick. Twice widowed. Older than your father. You feel something coil in your gut. Harwin adds she doesn't want it. Told me herself. You sit beside him. Quiet. Tense. Then what will you do? He exhales. I'm not her kin, but I can speak. And then, like it's nothing, I thought maybe you'd come too. You don't answer right away. But your heart already has. When you sleep that night, you dream not of fire or hunger or saints. You dream of women standing in a line, hands full of herbs, eyes unafraid faces turned to the rising sun. You dream of Maera with a red thread in her braid. You dream of yourself standing tall, saying no. And no one dares stop you. The walk to Branrick's homestead is quiet. You Harwin and Maera take the back path through the woods, the kind that winds beneath leaning trees and crackles with old leaves underfoot. No one talks much. There's a weight to this outing, not quite fear, not quite anger. Something in between. Maera stays behind. You told her to tend the rosemary. Told her to keep her back straight. Told her this isn't your shame to carry. Branrick's house isn't a house so much as a compound. Wide planked timber. A roof thick with moss. 2 goats tied out front, bleating without rhythm. He's a man of means, and he wants the world to know it, even if that world is only 3 neighbouring fields. You knock. He opens the door himself, eyes narrowing when he sees you. His gaze flicks to Harwin, then to Maera, then back to you. Well, he says, already irritated, "What's this?" You step forward. "She's not marrying you." He scoffs, "Not up to you." "Not up to you either," you reply evenly. "She's not livestock." He laughs. "You think choice belongs to girls with no land." Maera steps forward. "She has more than you ever will." Branrick bristles. She was promised. By whom, Harwin asks. There's a pause, a tightening of jaw muscle. Then, her uncle. You nod. The same uncle who was fined last year for cutting wood from the wrong grove. That uncle. He doesn't respond. You want a wife who's terrified, who hasn't even bled proper yet. You want her because she's quiet and small and won't talk back. But she will. And when she does, you'll break her. Branrick leans in. You know what this is, don't you, interfering? I know exactly what this is, you say, voice low. This is remembering. What it felt like to be given away like bread at a feast. Harwin steps forward. She won't be at your door. If you touch her, we'll make sure the council knows. The priest won't back you, Branrick snaps. I'm not asking the priest, you reply. I'm asking the women. He goes still. Because he knows. And you know. They always know. You turn and leave without another word. On the way back, Maera says you didn't even flinch. You answer, I already lived that life once. I refuse to live it twice by watching someone else fall into it. You stop by Maera's door on the way home. She opens it before you knock. Her eyes search yours like a trapped animal. You just nod. It's over, you say. She collapses into your arms, sobbing, not with fear but with relief. That night by the fire, you unroll your thread pouch and begin stitching a new charm, rosemary basil, and rose petals wrapped in linen. Harwin asks for her. You nod. He doesn't ask what it means. He just reaches for the bowl of dried mint and hands it to you. Later, when the stars come out and the moon floats soft and wide in the sky, you step outside barefoot. The ground is warm. The breeze smells like ripe grain. You exhale. Not in exhaustion, but in release. You didn't rewrite the world, but you rewrote a piece of it, and that matters. Historians still debate whether peasant women had any real power, whether the village woman was anything but a subject of church and family and duty. But they forget the sideways glances, the hands held under the table, the bundles passed from apron to apron, the silence that said everything. In your world, power isn't loud. It's quiet. It's persistent. It's a single woman saying no and another saying me too. And that echo, that's revolution. The letter arrives on a fog-heavy morning, tied with string, sealed in wax, stamped with a crest you half recognize. You turn it over in your hand 3 times before breaking the seal. It smells like beeswax and ink, and the sharp dust of parchment too long held in a drawer. It's from your father. You sit by the hearth to read it. Harwin watches from the doorway silent. He doesn't ask. He doesn't need to. The letter is careful, not warm, not cruel, just restrained as though each word was debated before being pinned to the page. He writes that your younger sister is to be married soon, that a merchant's son has offered a fair dowry, that your mother would like to see you again, that perhaps the past should be left where it belongs. You trace the ink with your finger. You picture his handwriting beside a ledger. You picture your mother smoothing her apron, biting her lip after every sentence he speaks, and your sister bright sharp-eyed and too easily silenced. You fold the letter once, then again, then tuck it beneath the saint carving above the fire, not because you've decided, but because the answer hasn't finished forming yet. That afternoon, while gathering time, Mayra appears at your side with a basket full of goose feathers. For the mattress, she says. You look at her puzzled. She grins. If I'm not being sold off, I might as well sleep well. You laugh harder than you have in weeks. Together, you work the feathers into cloth sitting on the warm steps of your cottage, the wind tugging at loose strands of your hair. Mayra hums an old tune. You add a harmony without thinking. The rhythm of ordinary life settles in again, but it hums now with undercurrents. The next few days are strange. The village seems to shift its eyes toward you, some in suspicion, some in solidarity. A few older women nod as you pass slight and solemn, like they've just remembered something they'd tried to forget. One afternoon you catch the priest glaring at the herb bundles drying on your windowsill. He mutters something about witches. You smile politely, and leave him a bundle of lavender all the same. The saints and the soil can coexist. You've seen it with your own hands. Harwin asks you over stew, will you go? You know what he means. Your old home, the marriage, the family that let you be offered up like a bag of grain. You answer slowly maybe, not to return, just to witness. He nods. That night, under a moon like wet silver, you sit at the table and write a letter back. You tell your father you will come, but not for him. You will come for your sister, to make sure she knows her silence is not her only inheritance, to make sure that before she binds herself to a man, someone tells her, you are not an object, you are not a debt to be repaid, you are a story still unfolding. You don't seal the letter with wax, you tie it with red thread, the same thread you've carried in your pocket since that first night in the woods, the same thread your cousin once stitched into your hem, the same thread you now wind through your life like a lifeline. Historians still debate whether women in your time ever travelled alone. You will. You always have. Even when your feet were bound by duty, your soul wandered ahead scouting the path. This time you'll follow her. The girl who once waited by the fire with braided hair and bruised wrists. She's not gone. She's just grown. The journey begins before dawn. You pack lightly just a wrapped loaf of oat bread, 2 dried apples a water skin, and a pouch of herbs tied tight with string. Harwin sees you off at the edge of the fields, hands in his pockets, chin tucked against the cold. He doesn't speak much, just pulls a red thread from his own pocket and presses it into your palm. For luck, he says. You nod. And then you walk. Past the well, past the goat path, past the tree where Mayra once tied a ribbon and whispered a wish. The sun rises slow and coppery behind you. You don't look back. The road is longer than you remember. It curves through woods, thick with birdsong, past streams that glitter like cracked glass, through a field where a cow regards you with suspicious curiosity. By midday, your feet ache. By dusk, they burn. But you don't stop, because you know what it's like to arrive too late. Your family's homestead appears just as the sky blushes with evening. The gate is smaller. The fence leans now. The tree you used to climb has lost a limb to wind or time. You stand there for a moment watching. No one sees you. No one yet. Then the door opens, and there she is. Your sister. Taller now, though not by much. Her hair braided in the same tight way your mother used to do yours. Her eyes wide, unsure, hungry. She recognizes you immediately. No gasp. No scream. Just one whispered word, you. You don't know if it's relief or accusation. But you step forward, and she lets you in. Inside the house is, as you remember, too clean, too quiet, too tense. Your father isn't home. Your mother busies herself with tea, her hands shaking only slightly. No one mentions the letter. No one mentions the years. You ask your sister to walk with you. She does. You bring her to the old garden where you once spent afternoons pulling weeds and imagining other lives. She says he's Kind, the merchant's son. You nod, and he's not old. You nod again. But I don't love him. There it is. The crack in the dam. You say nothing. Just hand her the thread. She stares at it. Then so quietly you almost miss it. Do I have to? No, you say. And the word lands between you like a stone tossed into still water. She breathes differently after that. That night you sleep in your old room, though it feels like someone else's now. The mattress is harder. The air thinner. You dream of Mayra singing and Mira shelling peas, of the lavender blooming around your doorway, of Harwin's hand resting steady on your back. You wake before the sun, and you know what you have to do. You leave a note on the hearth for your sister. Not to tell her what to do, but to remind her she has the right to choose. You slip out quietly, past the leaning fence, past the gate, into the world again. Historians still argue whether women travelled to things or away from them, whether their paths were escapes or pursuits. But sometimes it's both. You weren't running from your past. You were walking toward your power, 1 foot at a time. The road back feels different. Not shorter, your feet still blister your pack, still digs into your shoulder, but lighter somehow. Like each step presses something out of you instead of grinding more in. You pass the same fields, the same curve of river, the same bird nest tucked in the crook of that hawthorn tree. But now you notice more. The softness of the moss underfoot, the way the crows call in pairs, the whisper of your own breath measured present. You've crossed a line, not one visible on any map, but it lives in you now. You left a girl behind in that village, a girl with questions and bruises and hands that flinched, and you returned with a woman, who still asks, but no longer flinches. Mira is the first to see you. She rushes from her dorsal, flapping like a flag. She doesn't ask anything, just throws her arms around you and says you're home. That word hits different now. Home. You never quite believed it could belong to you. Now you do. Harwin waits by the gate, arms crossed, trying not to smile too obviously. You made it back, he says. You doubted. I always doubt. You laugh. He hands you a mug of warm cider, and the warmth of it feels like a crown. Back inside, Mayera has strung bundles of sage across the beams. For you, she says, to clear the air. You sniff the sweet smoky leaves and raise an eyebrow. Also, she adds, I burned some in the priest's direction, just in case. The three of you collapse into chairs and talk late into the evening. Of nothing, mostly. Of soups and roots and a goat that keeps escaping the fence. But underneath it all, threaded gently through every sentence, is a kind of humming peace. You belong here now, not as a wife, not as a healer, not even as a rebel, just as you. One morning, a girl named Ilsa shows up at your door. You remember her, the baby you delivered months ago now, with tufts of hair and a laugh that startles birds. Her mother holds her out and says she cries less when you hold her. So you do, and she stops crying. Just like that. Some days later, the midwife returns to full strength. But she doesn't take her place back entirely. She invites you to join her rounds, to learn more, to watch, to carry the knowledge forward. I won't be here forever, she says, and you both know what she means. So you follow, and you learn, not just how to birth babies and bind wounds, but how to speak gently when people are afraid, how to spot rot in grain before it spreads, how to listen between the lines of what people say and what they mean. One evening, the priest publicly denounces the mixing of herbs with prayer. You thank him, because the next day 5 women come asking for salves. That's how it works now. Every scowl births curiosity. Every shun creates a gathering. You don't preach. You don't demand. You just keep showing up. And in doing so, you become the thing they said couldn't exist. A woman who isn't owned, who isn't silent, who doesn't ask permission to breathe fully. Historians still argue whether medieval women had community, or whether they were pitted against each other by scarcity and fear. But, because you've seen it, because you've made it, because one woman dared to say, this stops with me, and another whispered, then I'll help you hold the line. That line stretches now. From garden beds to bread ovens, from whispered prayers to loud laughter in the fields, from one cottage to the next, like a red thread tying the village together in quiet resistance. And in the middle of it all, you sitting at your window, sipping nettle tea, watching the sun rise over a world you helped soften. You find the red thread again one morning, tucked in the hem of your apron where you'd forgotten it. It's frayed now, worn smooth from months of pocket-sitting and worry-fiddling and being tied and untied a dozen times. You sit by the fire, turning it in your hands. Mira glances over from where she's grinding barley, still carrying that old thing. You shrug. It's not just a string. She nods, smiling. It never is. That evening you begin to stitch again. Not clothes, not charms, but something new. A quilt, made from old dresses, scraps of linen, pieces of torn shawls and curtain lace. Each patch whispers a different story, some yours, some not. A faded blue square from Mayera's first headscarf. A corner of cloth Mira once used to swaddle her son. Even a scrap from your wedding dress, now unrecognizable in shape, but still familiar in texture. You don't intend to keep it. You don't know yet who it's for, only that the act of sewing brings something alive in you. Some evenings the children gather by your hearth. You teach them how to boil willow bark for aches, how to steep elderflower for fevers, how to know the difference between nettle and nightshade. They listen with wide eyes, interrupt often, and spill half your mint supply, giggling. You love it. One child asks, "Why do you know so much?" You think for a moment, then say, "Because no one taught me and I never want that to happen again." Harwin builds a shelf for yourselves. Mira weaves you a new basket. Maera begins writing down your remedies, lettering them carefully on rough parchment, binding them with twine. She jokes that one day you'll be more famous than any priest. Better, she says, they come to you to confess. You laugh, but part of you knows it's not far off. The older women begin coming more frequently now. Some with aches, some with gossip, some just for the silence of your hearth and the smell of rose oil steeping on the coals. One night Bera returns the elder with a voice like gravel and eyes like the edge of an axe. She sits beside you without speaking for a long time. Then she says they're whispering your name in the next village. You raise an eyebrow. Whispering what? That you're dangerous? You chuckle. I only steep teas. They think the tea makes women brave. You glance at your pot. It might. Bera stands. Keep brewing it. She leaves a pouch of dried chamomile on your step. No note. No signature. Just care. You realize this is what power looks like here. Not a crown. Not a sword. But a soft hand in yours and a recipe that saves a life. Historians still argue whether women like you were healers or heretics, whether knowledge born of earth and root could truly challenge the authority of Scripture. But they miss the point. It's not about challenge. It's about choice. You never asked to defy anyone. You just wanted to know how to stop the bleeding. And now you do. You know how to stop the bleeding, how to soothe the fever, how to stitch what was torn, even when it's not skin, even when it's the heart. The quilt grows bigger. So does your shelf. So does your circle. Not loud, not fast, but steady. Like something meant. The winter arrives slower than expected. First with fog, then frost, then the slow, creeping silence that settles over the village like a thick wool blanket. And in that stillness, people come. They always do in winter. A man with a twisted ankle from slipping on ice. A mother worried her son's cough won't stop. A girl with cold fingers and colder eyes who won't say why she won't go home. You make space. You heat broth. You grind mustard seed and thyme, wrap the girl's fingers in warm cloth and tuck her into Maera's bed. You don't ask for stories. You wait for them to arrive. One by one they do. The girl's name is Brynna. She left a place where voices grew sharp when the ale soured and hands moved too fast when the moon rose. You don't push, but you do tell her that here people knock before entering, that no one touches without permission, that the quilt on the bed has patches stitched by other girls who once needed somewhere to land. Brynna doesn't speak for 3 days. Then she asks if she can chop wood. You hand her the axe. She returns with straight arms and a straight back, and doesn't flinch when Mira claps her shoulder. It's a small miracle, but you've come to believe in those. More come. A boy from the Southern Trail who saw his sister die last harvest and now flinches at any cough. An older woman whose son won't let her burn candles for her late husband. A farmhand who just wants a hot meal and 5 minutes without being called useless. And still you make space. The cottage begins to feel like a halfway house between worlds. One world that bruises, and one that bandages. One night you dream of a room with walls made of books and floorboards lined with herbs. A place where no one owns you and no one forgets you. When you wake, your heart aches with the weight of a thing not real. Yet, Maera says we could build it. You blink. What? That house in your face. I see it every time someone new comes through the door. She draws a map in the ashes of the hearth, a wide building, low roof, herb garden, long table. A sanctuary. Mira smiles, we already have half the people. You sip your tea and say nothing, but your mind starts turning. Historians still debate whether such sanctuaries existed places for women and wanderers, and the worn down to simply rest to heal, to reclaim some dignity outside of the church or marriage or trade. But they forget how powerful a warm room and gentle voice can be. How powerful a woman becomes when she no longer asks permission. Winter deepens. The wind howls harder. The sheep grow heavy with soon-born lambs. But inside your walls it stays warm. Someone's always tending the fire. Someone's always chopping turnips or singing or carding wool. And you sit by the window with a book in one hand, your thread in the other, watching a world that once refused. You start to quietly open. They told you once a woman's place was at the hearth. They were right. But they forgot to mention that she could own it, that she could gather others, that she could make it holy not through prayers whispered by rote, but by making it a place no one leaves unchanged. It begins with a knock, not the soft kind like Brynna's, not the rhythmic familiar rap of Mira or Harwin or even the village priest. This one is firm. Deliberate. You open the door, and there, flanked by two thin-lipped men in woolen cloaks, stands a figure you never expected to see again, your father. He's older now. Not just in face, though the creases around his mouth have deepened and his eyes are cloudier, but in posture. A man once built like an ox, now leaning slightly to one side, like the world pushed him, and he didn't push back in time. You don't speak. You wait. I came alone, he says. You glance sideways at the two guards. They're not mine, just passing through. I hired their escort for the road. You nod. Still, you say nothing. He gestures to the quilt in your lap, half finished. You still sew. You shrug. I never stopped. The silence stretches like wool pulled too thin. Then he says your sister left him. You blink. She walked away. Said she wouldn't be traded like livestock. Said she learned that from you. Your throat tightens. He looks down. I didn't come to argue or to ask forgiveness. You wait. I just wanted to see what kind of life you built. Because people talk and I didn't want to believe it. A girl like you, a woman on her own. But now that I'm here, he looks around. At the herbs hanging from the rafters. At the warm stew steaming on the table. At the three children playing with Mira's cat. At Brinna shelling peas, her sleeves rolled and her laughter louder than the fire's crackle. I was wrong, he says. Not loud, but clear. You never thought you'd hear it. Not from him. He steps back from the door as if waiting for you to slam it shut. But you don't. You reach behind you, tear a strip of linen from your work basket and hand it to him. For the road, you say. He nods. Doesn't take your hand. Doesn't ask for anything else. Just walks back into the frost-white path with your thread tied loosely around his wrist. That night, Myra says, did that help? You don't answer right away. You stir the stew, watching the carrots bob like tiny rafts. Finally, I don't know if it helped him, but it helped me. And you realize it's not always about forgiveness. Sometimes it's just about making space inside yourself where bitterness used to live, so that joy can fit. The days begin to lengthen again. The snow recedes. The lambs are born, and with them new visitors. A scholar passing through hears of your cottage and asks to copy your herb book. A widow from 3 villages over asks if she can send her daughter to learn from you. A boy from the town scribes brings your name carved on a little block of wax. He says he was told to make a seal for the woman of the red thread. You laugh so hard you nearly drop your tea. You're not a myth. You're just a girl who said no once, and then kept walking. Historians still argue whether legacies were built by men with swords or women with spoons. But here in the hush of your own hearth you know the truth. The world shifts not with battles but with choices. With girls who walk away. With sisters who speak out. With women who keep the fire warm for strangers. And now your thread is in many hands. Tied around wrists. Woven into braids. Stitched into pockets. And every time someone feels it tug, they remember you are not what they tried to make you. You are what you chose to become. The dream returns, but this time it's clearer. You stand in a wide, sun-washed room. The walls are made of stone and woven branches laced with herbs and light. There are women at long tables, grinding powders, writing notes, mending clothes, laughing over something someone said. A child sits by the window counting seeds. Someone sings in the back a lullaby made of names long forgotten. You wake with the image still soft around you like a shawl. So you begin to build, not alone. You ask Myra to draw up plans. Harwin gathers timber. Mira teaches the children how to press clay for the hearth tiles. Even Brinna helps her hands now steady her voice now sure. Each stone set is a promise. Each nail driven in a thread pulled tight. They call it a school, a refuge, a house of healing, but you just call it ours. You open its doors not with ceremony, but with soup, with open windows, with shelves lined in balms, with laughter that spills out onto the street like steam from bread just pulled from the oven. People come, from all over. Some stay a day, some stay a year. Some leave with only a notebook of recipes and a red thread tied tight to their walking staff. A girl from the coast teaches you to dry seaweed for burns. A boy from the mountains shows you a fungus that dulls pain without making one drowsy. An old woman from the capital tells you of a place where midwives were once honoured like knights. You nod and write it all down. Historians still argue whether such places were real, whether women could ever create something that survived war famine, the slow grind of time. They look for buildings, for records, for seals, but they miss the marks left on hands, on hearts, on the space between one person's fear and another's gentleness. They forget that legacy isn't always etched in stone. Sometimes it's boiled into tea, or tucked into the corner of a worn quilt, or passed between fingers like a quiet secret. And maybe one day they'll find a red thread tied to the wrist of a skeleton in some forgotten grave, and they'll wonder what it meant. But you'll know. It meant someone refused to be owned, to be bartered, to be silenced, and that someone became 100 someones, 1,000, a thread that reached farther than you ever imagined. You sit at your window now, not in hiding, but in rest, watching as girls come up the path, some scared, some laughing, all carrying something they're ready to put down. You greet them the same way each time, with warm hands and warmer silence. And when they're ready, you ask, "What do you want to become?" And no one laughs at the question anymore. Because here they can answer. Because here they are heard. And now, as the night settles in and your mind floats somewhere between waking and rest, take one last breath with her. Feel the worn stone beneath her feet, the scent of mint and ash drifting through the windows, the sound of laughter fading into candlelight. You are no longer in the marketplace. You are not on the road. You are in a room where no one owns you, where your story is yours and yours alone. Let that thread tie softly around your own wrist for a moment, not to bind, but to remind that you too can leave, rebuild, say no, say yes, begin again. The world may not remember every footstep, but it remembers warmth, it remembers kindness, it remembers the girl who stitched her way into legend not with fire or fury, but with steady hands and fierce gentleness. So tonight rest like you've built something, because you have, even if it's only inside you for now. And tomorrow, perhaps you build again. Good night.